And there are times when, it's an attorney or it's an estate, the executive of the estate, and sometimes it's what they fill out in there is somewhat ambiguous. We're gonna talk a lot about disclosure forms here, but we're not gonna get into too much here. Line 448 or 248, lead-based paint. Anything that was built before 1978 will require a lead-based paint. So when you're listing a house, if the house is older, was built before 1978, you gotta have this as part of the listing contract, lead-based paint. When you're writing an offer to purchase, anything that's older than that, in the offer to purchase, it must have a lead-based paint acknowledgement form. You do a check mark on line 248 that it does have. Now, if it's a newer house, that's 3 years old, then on line 248, you're gonna mark not applicable. Does not apply. Title work, we're not gonna spend too much time on title work. Obviously, line 251 is title commitment. Line 260, actually, line 261, you're gonna check mark seller, because the seller's gonna pay for the owner's title insurance premium. Line 263, or actually 264, you're gonna mark that the buyer's gonna pay for the lender's title insurance premium. Now, when the buyer's paying cash, you go down to line 265 and you mark other, and right next to that, you write cash or none. There is no lender's title insurance premium because there is no mortgage payment. Line 268, generally speaking, it's my buyer. Matter of fact, it is my buyer's right in every situation to choose the title company. So normally I say the buyer, which is me, I do it on behalf of my buyer. Actually, the transaction coordinators order the title work for my buyer, and it's done immediately. So line 272, I want to read to you specifically, says pursuant to federal and state law, seller cannot make seller's selection of the title insurance provider a condition of this agreement. So when I list a house, I'll put in agent remarks, seller would prefer using such and such title company. We've already started preliminary title work there, or the house that they're buying is closing at this title company. So you're feeding to the buyer's agent, make them understand why you want to close with this title company, and so you can close back to back, or they've already done preliminary title. So you're feeding that to the buyer's agent. You're not demanding it. It can't be demanded. It says it right on here. So you have a listing agent trying to tell you where it's going to close at. It has to close here. This is why it has to close here. You can just go to the line, if you want to read it out loud, like I did, 272. You can't make it part of this contract. You can add it into the contract saying the seller's going to select, because you've agreed to do it, your buyer's agreed to do it on the benefit of the seller, because the seller's already closing in that specific place for the house they're buying. So be cooperative. Understand, most buyers don't give it up. Why would they? They don't know one from another. However, the title insurance stays with the house. It is their title insurance, just like all other insurance on their car, their health, their home. Title insurance stays with the house. It's their title insurance. They have the right to choose who provides it. That's why that's on it. So don't make it a huge fight. Just say to the buyer, hey, the seller of this house wants to close over here. Are you okay with that? This is why they want to close over here. Most of them say, yeah, sure, no big deal. Some agents get really, protective about this because they have their favorite title companies and they want to be very loyal to them and make sure it happens at their title company. It's not that we're losing a deal over or starting a huge fight, guys. Make sure you're doing this business for your buyers and sellers, not for your favorite title company. And I have my favorites. Okay, taxes. Line 282. It's prorated. Check mark prorated. Most of these deals are going to be prorated where it shows the seller's paying all the taxes due at the day of closing. Line 285, you would do in a new construction house. You might need some help on that, deciding what the dollar amount is being paid from the seller. So, for example, if you're buying a new construction house, the taxes on that property is almost nothing because the house has just got built. It's not going to get assessed until 2024. So if you're helping someone buy a construction house today, taxes on that property might be $300 a year. It's just on the land. So when the taxes become due after it's assessed, where's all this money coming from? So when you do prorated taxes, keep in mind that comes from the seller side of the transaction. Most of it goes to the buyer side as a credit on the right side of the closing statement. That way, when the taxes get billed in the future, it was money the buyer saved at closing. That's why it's done that way. But you can't prorate taxes on new construction house. You might be saving the buyer $150. But 2024, taxes on that property is going to be $3,200 a year. So that's why in 285, you can ask from the builder, if you can get it from them, can we have $3,000 as a credit to the buyer at closing for the taxes that are coming up on the house in the future? That's why it's done. You understand the difference? prorated when it's an existing home. But when it's a new construction home, you have to ask for that number. There's nothing prorated. $300 a year. Line 317, we're not gonna get into all this, but associations, each line kind of put 5 in. You get 5 days to get the paperwork, the covenants to the buyer. The buyer has 5 days to object to what's on there. If it's a deal breaker, there might be something in there that's a deal breaker for the buyer. And then the last one says 5 days. The seller has 5 days to get to the buyer. Any approvals that have to be done by the association. Believe it or not, there are some associations that have to approve your buyer to buy in that association. A lot of times you don't even know because no one says it.
Is it gonna be like a older community, like a senior living community or something?
Might be.
Gated community. Yeah, gated community, something like that. That'll get nice too.
Line 336, buyer acknowledges that in every, line 336, buyer acknowledges that in every neighborhood there are conditions which others may find objectionable. Buyer shall therefore be responsible to become fully acquainted with neighborhood and other off-site conditions that could affect the property. So you're gonna hear this, I hate it, right? Especially someone I don't know. Someone I know very well doesn't bother me too much. But this buyers buying their first house quite often want to know what we think about the neighborhood. And trust me, I have an opinion about every neighbor. I've grown up, I've lived in different places in this town. And I can live anywhere in this town. But I have different opinions about different neighborhoods, but I can never convey that. Ever. Ever. It's called steering. It's illegal whether it's intentional or unintentional. It's illegal whether you meant good by it or not. Okay? So that's why it's in bold. The buyers need to understand it because they're going to ask them. They don't know. They think they're supposed to ask them. Tell me what you know about the neighborhood. Hey, you can go, my house over there looks like a rental property. It's pretty run down. I mean, you can start saying stupid stuff like that. I have said to people that I know very well that I can trust it's not going to report me. But you understand when you're doing that, you're steering people. It's not your job. You need to stay inside that property line and help them buy this. Inside that property line, that's your responsibility. Outside that property line, it says verbatim, it's the buyer's responsibility. So get used to saying, no, according to the license law, I can't discuss that. It's called steering that's illegal. Sorry. There's a lot of resources online for you to figure that out, right? You guys can look up resources. If you want to give them the resources, you can give it to them. I wouldn't even do that. It's real easy. Someone needs to know the crime rate for that house. You can get on it. Just Google it. Crime rate for Sports 808, whatever it is. It's easy enough to do. You don't have to tell them to do it. You know what I mean? There are many resources online where you can use that.
Does that apply to people who are moving from out of state? No.
Yeah, doesn't matter where they come from. They can be someone you grew up with, or they can be somebody you just met from another state. It doesn't matter where they come.
What's the fine line, like if your client says, so I'm not from there, I was looking at this house, what do you know about the area? You can't say like it has a higher crime rate than others,
No.
like you.
That's right.
What did you say last time? Stay within the boundaries?
Yeah, stay within the boundaries of the property. When it goes outside, it's the buyer's responsibility. There's no asterisk next to that. For every buyer, it's their responsibility to figure that out.
I would just tell them to go online and just do a review or do a search.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Crimereporters.com or something like that. You know.
It's true.
Yeah.
That's right.
So, what about, I showed a particular property and there was a commercial property in the backyard. Is that something that you would ever talk about, or is that?
In the backyard or behind the backyard?
It was literally the backyard, like there was an auto shop behind the house. And I told him, I said, this may affect your future resale value for somebody that may not want to look at a commercial.
Inside the property line, absolutely, you can discuss it. Right? Inside the property line, you absolutely can.
Well, it was a neighboring property. Or for example, I showed like a $400,000 house yesterday that was surrounded by apartment buildings. And I said that the apartment buildings may affect the resale value because somebody that buys a $400,000 house may not want an apartment building in their backyard.
So when you do a market analysis, you get on the MLS and you pull up all the properties in the surrounding area that are most similar to the house you're helping them buy, right? And like I said, when I showed my CMA on that house earlier, it said 440 was the average. But I told them because of the condition of the house, it would be a little bit lower, so they went up and get it for 425. None of that conversation had to do with what was surrounding it. So you understand, it's a slippery slope. Absolutely, what you're saying is not wrong. There are conditions outside it called external obsolescence. Anything that's outside the property line that can affect the body, it can be railroad tracks, it can be a busy road, it can be an industrial park, it can be a crappy apartment complex, that can affect the body. But the point that I'm making is, and when you share the CMA, hey, the CMA says 225, but I do have concerns. And when you say I have concerns about what's going on outside the property, that could be a little bit lower. Again, you have to be very careful how you say that to.
Like
If you don't know who you're saying that to, I wouldn't even bring it up. But if it's someone you can trust, it's not going to report you. It's going to say you're discriminating.
Like I had a guy showed a house and he actually made a comment about the condition of the roads. It was like, I don't know, a little bit older development that he's like, I don't like the condition of the roads in this neighborhood, for an example.
That comes back on the HOA though.
It should technically, but like, well, for example, I had another guy. He did not like the condition of sidewalks because he had small children. And I happened to notice, like, most of the sidewalks were in bad condition because I was, out walking in the neighborhood and.
We got to move on. I'm going to show one more thing real quick. I sold a house in Arlington Park last year. I sold a house in Arlington Park last year to a girl and her boyfriend, and I've watched this girl growing up. Her father is one of my best friends. So I was very open with her, how I felt about Arlington Park. Okay? I've sold many houses in Arlington Park. I think it's a wonderful community, right? There's a lot of extra things you can do there. And I played golf there. I've been on the trails many times. I've been to swimming pools. But, so I personally have experienced it. It's hard not to share it with somebody you trust. It's not going to report you, okay? So here's my point. I want you to visualize this. And I've already shared this in another class. So let's say they're on the trails, riding bikes on the trails, and one of the kids get hurt. And it winds up being because part of the sidewalk was defective, it was heaved up or whatever, and they crashed the bike and got hurt. But now they're trying to sue the association. Got an $80,000 bill, and that their insurance company won't pay for whatever reason, so they're suing the association. Of course, the association's not gonna pay for it, it wasn't their fault. Now they're in litigation, it's gonna take 2 or 3 years to resolve, it's gonna wind up costing $200,000. I'm not saying it's happening. What I'm trying to tell you, no matter where you go, what happens outside that property line, good or bad, when you share your opinions about it and think it's a good place for them to be, it may not turn out to be a great place to be. What have I done besides open myself up? And I know this girl very well. Her boyfriend may not feel the same about me. And when they're trying to sue the association, not getting anywhere, maybe their attorney's gonna say, who sold you this house? Okay, so they get my name. The attorney reaches out to me, we go into a deposition. What did you tell them about this association man that they're fighting with right now? Well, I said, they're wonderful. So I'm saying, you understand what you're opening yourself up to. You can have opinions about what's going on outside that property line, good or bad, the best intentions in the world. But that's not our job. That make sense? Here, I've been doing this forever, and I knew as I was saying these words to her, I mean, as the words are coming out of my mouth, as they never do, but because I watched her grow up, and I love her, and I care about her, I'm telling her what a wonderful place this is to be, and it probably will be. When it turns out to be horrible, and they've hired an attorney, and the attorney, I get drug into this, because the attorney says I got to be drug into it. And according to them, this is a wonderful place to live. If I had never said such a thing, if it's never been text, I'm sure it's text somewhere. I probably text some of that to them. That's the worst part, if I actually texted. And if I said it, they said I said it, and it's their word against mine, I have to lie and say I didn't said it, guess who wins? All they gotta do is say I said it. They don't have to prove it. They always take the victim's word first. So you understand what I'm saying? So when you go outside the property line, you're opening yourself up.
How do you feel about, like, if there's a neighbor out? Can you have,
If there's a neighbor what?
like, a neighbor outside, and maybe your clients are wondering about the areas, and can you say, oh, you're always welcome to talk to the neighbors?
Well, I can do that. I can go talk to the neighbors. And again, you have resources. Some people are very, I can tell you, there's some clients that are very particular about where they move to for different reasons. Culture, okay? That's not for me to decide. I'm sure I was getting tested by the state of Indiana one time when a lady came to me, I was showing her house after house after house, and she said things to me that, I don't want to be in a neighborhood that has these kind of people in it. It felt like I was getting tested. Her dad says that. And actually, I gotta move on. But we're actually standing outside a house one day after we get done showing it, and there was a kid on the bike, and I'm getting ready to get in my car, and she's standing in the right of way, and she pointed at me. I don't want any of this in my neighborhood. I was like, oh my God. I'm not gonna say what she said. I think I was getting tested. I mean, maybe that's how she really felt. Okay? That's pretty obvious. That's not obvious. If that's said to you, you don't go, oh, let me write that down. Okay, next document, alternative dispute resolution addendum we're gonna just touch on. I've been in arbitration actually 6 times in 28 years. You want to avoid it at all costs if you can, they're not fun. If you're gonna be a real estate attorney and you like doing that, you don't get paid anything to do it. It'll take weeks and months out of your life, and you'll have to relocate all the documents, and, I mean, yeah, you have to do a lot of investigating. It's not something you wanna do. But, so when you have something that's being debated before closing, because the deal fell apart, now they're fighting over earnest money, or the deal did close, and something came up, hey, we got a defective sewer line, we want the seller to replace it, it's gonna cost $4,000. Seller's going, what are we talking about? I'm not running the sewer line when I live there. Okay, what's it gonna cost me $4,000 to replace it? Either you're paying for it, or we're going to arbitration. Let's go to arbitration. So I had a similar situation that happened to me where my buyer took someone to arbitration, and we were able to find out from Roto-Rooter that they'd been there 12 times in the last 10 years. I'm like, we got him. We got him. You know what I'm saying? So we go to arbitration, and sure enough, you're allowed, when you're at arbitration, anybody can ask questions of anybody. So I sat right there and asked the seller, according to Roto-Rooter, they've been to this house 12 times in the last 10 years. We go, yep, that's right. Oh my God, they actually admitted it. They actually told the truth. I mean, this is a shot. I mean, so what happened, and so I could tell, our arbitrator sitting right to my left, and he's talking about, well, why does the seller have to disclose this? Like, so what happened, obviously, the inspector came and flushed the toilets, everything worked okay. So at the time of the inspection, at the time of the closing, the sewer line was working. We lost the case, and that's what he wound up saying in his letter. At the time of the inspection, at the time of the closing, it was working. Seller had no obligation to disclose it. So you tell me. He did ask a question. I could tell his leading questions as he's asking me questions. He's asking, what does a seller have to disclose? I'm like, well, I tell my sellers anything they have that they've done in the house, replacing the roof, replacing the water heater, whatever they have, leave it on the kitchen counter. You know, you don't put it in the disclosure form because you have a new water heater. You don't have to put you replaced the water heater 2 years ago. But if it's something like that, that's an outstanding issue that's never fully getting repaired, obviously. It's like, you know,
Wouldn't
yeah.
that fall back on your buyer though, because they didn't do the septic inspection or the sewer line inspection?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So what happens when a buyer spends $400 to $600 to have inspectors check out numerous things? Inspectors don't check sewer lines, they flush the toilet. Your buyer has to spend more money to get Roto-Rooter or somebody out there to check the sewer lines. I bought a house once, 2 o'clock in the morning, about a month and a half after we closed on it, having a party at my house. Oh my God, Dan, someone was upstairs. I go upstairs. Yep, it's all coming into my bathroom. I'm a realtor. I didn't have it inspected. I was so mad at that seller, I called that seller. We had to come out occasionally and clean up the roots or whatever. I just let it go. I had cleaned out a couple times. But I'm saying, it's very common not to check that part out. Everything that's on the property, everything, not just the house, can be checked. It's kind of expensive. That's why you would think we couldn't lose. When that happened, that history's there. The seller's like, yeah, what's the big deal? Anyway, let's move on. Alternative dispute resolution. Try to avoid it if you can. It's up to $6,000. You're supposed to take it through the Better Business Bureau. Lead-based paint. Lead-based paint certification acknowledgement. When I list the house, normally my seller marks line 20. The seller has no knowledge of lead-based paint. The seller has no reports of lead-based paint in the house. That's line 29. If your buyers are not getting this, if you look at line 33, buyer has received the pamphlet, Protect Your Family from lead-based paint. They're supposed to initial that, indicating they got that from you. I mean, they're actually supposed to physically get it from you. You can have an initial without giving it to them. They're supposed to, a lot of them don't even know. They just initial it, don't even know. I email it over to them. So you should be able to have it saved on your computer. Just email it over to them. We used to have hard copies everywhere. I used to hand it to them all the time when I showed the house to them the first time. If they're looking at older houses. And then line 34, they're supposed to initial, indicating that they're marking 1 or 2 below. I always have marked the second one. I've only had one buyer in all these years I've done this actually do a lead-based paint inspection. It's very expensive to do. Basically, they're gonna take chips off the house if they can get any chips. If not, they have to carve the paint off the house and send it to a lab. And the lab says whether it has any level of lead-based paint in it. And if it does, I doubt any stuff. So if, right here, if I did this in mixed wall, we took a sample, sent it to a lab, and the test result says it comes back with high lead, counts of lead-based paint. So now we gotta make Mick completely sand this house down and repaint it. You know, the whole house has lead-based paint. I just kind of tell my buyers from that perspective. No seller's going to completely strip their house down, completely sand their house down, and repaint it. This is to protect all parties involved. Back when I was a kid growing up, we used to see the commercials all the time talking about lead-based paint. Kids were getting sick all the time. So these documents started to get implemented into our lives. They're there to protect buyers so they understand the hazards of lead-based paint. It's government red tape that's important, but it's somewhat redundant. Not a lot we can physically do about it. Oh, here's my favorite form, residential disclosure forms. So I'm not going to read the entire thing, it's very fine print, the top and bottom, but you will find in there, verbatim, it says, this is not part of the contract. It is attached to the contract, but this is not a contract between the seller and the buyer. This is only for informational purposes to the seller's best knowledge of the condition of the house. It's not a warranty, it says it's not a warranty. It says it's still the buyer's responsibility to get inspections done. So unfortunately, our buyers, partly because it's our fault, or partly because we don't know, put too much stock into this document. They want this document to be a warranty. They want this document to protect them from anything that could be wrong with the house. They want to be able to use this document and go back and sue or arbitrate with the seller. And as you can see the case I just shared with you, where they didn't disclose anything on there, the arbitrator agreed with it.
Second caveat and Tor.
What's that?
Buyers beware, caveat and Tor.
Well, it's already on there.
Yeah, I just think about that when.
No, exactly, no, but it's already, it says that, the fine print, read at the top and the bottom, which I'm not gonna read to you. Take some time to read it. I've been messing with this document for years. The wording's probably changed slightly over the years. When I started doing training last year, and actually reading for word what this says, I was, oh my God, this is worse than I thought. When I say it's worse than I thought, it has less leverage, it has less importance than ever. This is only to the seller's best knowledge, it's only for information, it's not a contract between the buyer and the seller. It says it's not a contract. It's not meant to be a contract. Buyers misunderstand that it's a contract. They do sign it, they're signing the knowledge that they've read it. Just like the office policy form for buyers is not a contract. It explains agency. This is very similar to that. This explains the seller's best knowledge of the condition of the house. It's not a guarantee, it's not a warranty. Buyers should still get their inspection. It doesn't identify us, by the way. It's not our responsibility to fill this out. Not our responsibility to get it right. So buyers, unfortunately, are somewhat misled into thinking this has a lot of weight. It doesn't. You still have to have a sign, don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to downplay it. I'm not trying to downplay the importance of it, but don't, again, overpromise what it means. So when they would get mad, and I've had this happen. Seller lied to me. They didn't put on a disclosure form. I go, they don't have to. Oh, they lied. Maybe they did. They might have. I have sellers asking, do I have to put that on the disclosure form? I go, well, you do now. You just told me. Because I have to disclose it now. Okay. A lot of times they don't like to talk about when it rains hard enough, they get water in the basement. No, write it in there and explain it. About twice a year, I get the water in the northeast corner of the basement. You probably disclose it up front. Addendum to purchase rate escalation clauses. I learned escalation clauses about 5 or 6 years ago by accident. I'm sure I should have known, but I didn't know because I was trying to help a buyer buy a house down in Huntington, and we had competition. Asking for highest and best. So I gave us our highest and best. They really wanted this house. I told the listing agent that. And then the listing agent came back and said, hey man, sorry. Seller's going to accept an offer on another deal. I go, are you sure there's nothing we can do? No, they're right in the middle of countering with another buyer. They're countering? You asked for highest and best. Yeah, well, they're countering another offer. Like, how's that possible? Because they did an escalation clause. Oh my God. Yeah. So I'm hearing him going, well, I can't act like I don't know what he's talking about. I went, okay. I go, full enough. What the hell's an escalation clause? Okay? That's how I learned escalation clause. I didn't learn it in class. I had to learn it out on the street, getting burned by my buyer that desperately wanted the house. Don't let that happen to you. Understand how this form works. It can help your buyer get a house. So basically in line 16, that is the dollar amount that's called the escalation terms. So when you write an offer for 250, saying you're gonna escalate it up to 275, which you do in line at 19, that's the cap. Your buyer's willing to go up to. Purchase price, page 1 says 250, escalate to 275. And then on line 16, tells you the dollar amount your buyer's willing to go higher than any offers between 250 and 275. So I'm writing an offer for 250, we're escalating to 275, and we're willing to go 2,000 grand over any other offers that are higher than 250 up to 275. So if the second offer came in and it's 270, the seller's supposed to write you a counter offer back for 272 so your buyer can sign it. That's what's supposed to happen. Don't know that it always happens quite that way, but that's how it's designed. Okay? So, escalation clause. We're not gonna spend too much more time on that. At least not today. Appraisal gap coverage addendum. This one's even better. This one's even better. Appraisal gap coverage addendum. So I learned this one out in the field. I knew what appraisal gaps were, and I'd been writing appraisal gaps for a while. And I had Corey Malcolm tell me on a house I helped a buyer buy a year and a half ago. His words almost verbatim. I find it quote him exactly. Dan, the appraisal gap is more important than the escalation clause. And he explained why. He said basically you can go as high as you want on the escalation clause. Appraiser's never going to go that high. I need to know how much your buyer's going to guarantee. Again, I'm going, of course. I kind of go, well, I know that. No problem, Corey, we'll work on it. So we sent him a new one with a higher appraisal gap. And we got the house because of it. Okay? So appraisal gaps can only be promised by the amount of money your buyer has as extra on top of their closing costs and down payment already. If their closing costs and down payment already is $15,000, and then you have an appraisal gap on top of that's $15,000, they better be able to bring 30 grand to closing. Because it may come to that. If that appraisal gap winds up being $15,000. If they bought it for $275 and the appraiser says it's worth $260, they're going to pay $275. They have to bring that extra 15 grand to closing on top of their down payment, on top of their closing costs. They need to have that. So you need to make sure when you're writing an appraisal gap for your buyer, they have the money.
It's basically cash on top of what the appraised value is.
Mhm.
Is what you're doing.
I have one that's closing. It's not mine. It's going to close sometime early August 15th or whatever. Just found out 2 days ago. The appraisal came in. We paid $279 for the house. The appraisal came in for $270. We did a $15,000 appraisal gap. My buyer's still paying $279, and they're more than happy to do it. Our escalation cost is way above that. So I told him, I explained to him, when the appraiser comes in, if it's cut, you're still going to pay up to this dollar amount. So they're paying $4,000 over appraised value, and they're very happy to do that. But you got to make sure your buyer's okay with doing it, because if you don't explain it right, then you get a cut appraisal, and you go, well, you still got to pay the full price. You're like, wait a minute, what? And if they go, wait, what? You go, oh God, I didn't explain it to them right. They didn't understand. And it can be kind of hard to save the deal at that point. But if you save it, they're not very happy with you. You might get to the closing table, they may not ever want to talk to you. So make sure they understand the appraisal gap. It's a great tool to help you get properties in competition. Addendum to purchase rate, first right contingency. So the first part of that is the date, today's date. The second part of that is the date the offer was written, which is normally the same date. And then the address of the property, it's property number 1. And then line 5 is the address of the property that the buyer is selling. And at the end of line 8 is within a certain number of days. And in today's marketplace, I usually put around 14 days. In a typical market, where it's a buyer's market, I might put 30 days. But most houses are still selling less than 14 days. Again, you have to have a good sense of what that buyer's house is, condition it's in, what price they're going to let it list. If they're going to force you to list a little bit higher, you might have to put 30 days. So while the property, you got the house under contract, and we're waiting for the buyer's house to sell, we say on line 11, whether or not it's currently on the market, that'd be the first box. If it's not currently on the market,